This last Thursday, I, 29 female, went over to my boyfriend Jay's 25 house for dinner and brought my son, preschooler, with me. Jay and I have been together for 1.5 years now, and he's the most amazing man in the world. He's been amazing with my son. His bio father is not in his life, and I can genuinely see him as the one. Jay's parents came over as well. It's not that I don't get along with them. I've only ever seen them 3 times before. I've not had any time to really bond with them, I guess. They had never met my son in person, but they knew about him. By the time I arrived, Jay's parents were already there and helping him finish dinner. We greeted each other, and Jay's dad asked, "And who's this little guy?" I introduced them to my son and then introduced Jay's parents as grandma and grandpa to my precious boy. I didn't notice then, but all 3 became quiet almost immediately. I ended up waiting in the living room alone for almost half an hour before dinner, and things just were incredibly awkward for the rest of the night. My son did end up calling his parents by grandma and grandpa, and I quickly noticed both of them would be very disingenuous and awkward about it over dinner, but they didn't say anything to me about it. They didn't stick around for long, but when they left, both were very cold to me. I asked Jay what their deal was, and he lost it on me. He claims I put him in an incredibly awkward position. His parents apparently didn't think that we were that serious yet and began questioning him if I was only using him as a replacement daddy. He said that it was way out of line to introduce them that way without even talking to him beforehand. I think it's ridiculous. If one day he's going to be my son's stepdad, then why go through this formal nonsense? He claimed that's not the point, and we fought until I stormed out. We haven't talked since, and I've simply been waiting for an apology. I talked with my sister about it last night, and she said she was mortified to hear this. She also didn't get that we were all that serious, and she never felt like Jay intended to take on a dad role. This has got me questioning if I was wrong. You are the idiot. You basically decided that Jay and his family are now your son's family, all on your own, with no discussion beforehand, and that is why everyone is upset. While I'm sure no one is against the idea outright, the formal nonsense is a very necessary step when it comes to merging families. To be honest, you probably need to have a serious discussion with Jay about where this is heading sooner rather than later if both his parents and your sister didn't think you two were that serious. What if he doesn't see himself as a father to your child, or doesn't see the relationship that serious either? This is why we need the formal nonsense and talking it through with everyone involved. Are you really shocked that the parents of a 25-year-old aren't ready to be called grandma and grandpa yet? Yikes. This is so cringe, and I have major secondhand embarrassment. Next up, OP takes her boyfriend on a dinner date, pulls out a veil, and the servers roll back screens to reveal a gospel choir and a minister ready to marry them in front of the whole restaurant. Wow, how extremely awkward. Also, did you think for half a second how devastated your son will be when you guys break up and grandma and grandpa are no longer in his life? How utterly confusing for him. You didn't think about anyone but yourself and your childish fantasy. You created an unnecessary core memory for your poor son. He'll likely never forget the moment he was introduced to people you called his grandparents and will develop feelings of rejection and abandonment, all because of your selfishness. And even though I'm a woman, if I were your boyfriend, I would break up with you over this. There was a line and you just tra-la-la skipped over that line. Update number 1. Okay, I messed up. I genuinely thought that Jay would be okay with this. Jay's always treated my son so well. I guess I misread treating him kindly as being okay with being his father figure. I'm pretty sure I ruined this for myself, but most importantly, I hurt my son through all of this. So I called Jay and apologized. We're going to take a break. I'm going to look into making sure I didn't scar my kid with this. Update number 2. People still seemed interested in my story about introducing my boyfriend Jay's parents to my son as grandma and grandpa. I thought I would update everyone on what happened. Immediately when I realized I was in the wrong, I called Jay and apologized for what happened. He told me he needed some space and wanted to take a break. I ended up calling his mother as well and apologized profusely. His mother forgave me, and after I explained my reasoning, said she didn't hold it against me. However, in retrospect, I think she was only being nice to me, knowing her son was going to end the relationship. Speaking of, Jay ended the relationship. I decided to take the advice given here about sitting down with Jay and getting on the same page about our relationship. I also saw some of the comments here about taking a break equals relationship ended. So I called Jay and told him that I wanted to talk sooner rather than later about this. We met yesterday, and while I feel our talk went well, it was really obvious to me that Jay was done with the relationship. He said that while he always knew that me and my son were a package deal, he hadn't decided at that point if he was truly going to take on the dad role for my son. He felt like my interpreting his niceness and acceptance of my son as a fatherly role was a red flag for him, overall, especially because we had never talked about it at all. He said that the real problem he had was me deciding that his parents were grandma and grandpa without even talking to him about it. My original refusal to apologize and expecting him to as well were part of it as well. There are other things he brought up that I feel are beyond this issue anyway, so I'm going to leave them out. Many of the criticisms left on my original post lines up with what he said, so I can really say for certain I messed up big time. I apologized, but I knew there was really no hope of saving this, so I didn't push when he said he felt like we should end the relationship. Overall, I realized that I really need to work on my own expectations for my partner and how he'll fit into my son's life. I also really need to work on my own communication skills. I, 20 female, am babysitting my niece, preschooler, for the week while my sister's away on a business trip. My niece misses her mom, so to cheer her up, I put a couple of treats in her lunch. Her lunch was a turkey and cheese sandwich with cucumbers and avocado, carrot sticks and ranch, apple slices, cookie, fruit snacks, brownie, juice box. Clearly not the healthiest, but also this is a special treat, and she has all 5 food groups. I dropped my niece off at 9, and at 10, snack time, I got a call from the teacher saying that I had to drop off a new lunch because my niece's was too unhealthy. I told her to give my niece the fruits or vegetables if she has a problem with the treats, and she told me she threw away the lunch because it was distracting to the other kids. I decided to call the office and tell them that I needed to pull my niece out for an appointment at 11. Lunch is at 11:30, and that she'd be back by the end of lunch. So at 11, I picked her up, and we got Happy Meals, cookies, fruit snacks, and milkshakes. Then at 12, end of lunch, I dropped her off with her Happy Meal box and her almost finished milkshake. The teacher saw this and was fuming. She told my sister what happened because shortly after, I got a call from my sister saying that I was being petty and should have just dropped off a new sandwich. Am I the idiot for pulling my niece out and filling her up on sugar because her teacher threw away her lunch? Not the idiot. What the actual heck? Now kids aren't allowed to even bring lunches with a treat in them? What kind of power trip do you have to be on to throw away a preschooler's lunch? So if you had dressed your niece in very pretty clothes that bothered the other kids, but the teacher have ripped them off, thrown them away, and told you to bring ratty ones? I suppose if your niece had been showboating and bragging about, "Oh, look how awesome my lunch is," there might be some grounds for the teacher to get involved here. Or was this just the teacher seeing in the box at snack time? If so, she should have stayed in her freaking lane. This sounds like a teacher making a big show of what happens to children whose adults pack them cookies and brownies. It's meant to make the kids keep the parents in line. Mine protested when I wanted to pack them some leftover brownies from last night's dessert, and of course to prevent food envy in the other kids. The teacher went all the way overboard though, and threw out the healthy items with the unhealthy, so she can reimburse OP for those. If I were OP, I'd have marched into the middle of the class in front of all the kids and handed the teacher a bill, demanding they immediately reimburse me for the food they recklessly wasted. Of course, I'd also like to ask them, how could they ever waste good food like that, knowing that there are starving people in this world? If they want to make a big show of things, then they can darn well expect the same in return. Avocados are not cheap. Food isn't cheap. So my daughter is a young teen, and I had agreed to let her go to a sleepover at one of her friends' houses. Her friend has been over to my house a few times, and I've met her parents a few times too. So I dropped her off last night, and maybe 3 hours later, I got a text from my daughter, who was in a McDonald's drive-thru, and told me that they wouldn't get her anything to eat and won't let her have any snacks. I called her, and before she said anything, I could hear them laughing about it. Luckily, that McDonald's was on the way to where I was driving to, so I went there and spotted them. My daughter ran to me and their faces looked shocked. I said not to call or message about interacting with my daughter ever again and left. I'm not being told that I was inconsiderate of their possible situations because they might be on a budget, but my thing is, if they were, why the heck wouldn't they tell me this? I would have gladly given my daughter money instead of you sitting there laughing about not feeding my kid. Not the idiot. Your daughter contacted you because she was uncomfortable in the care of other adults. She ran to you, obviously wanting to be extracted from this situation. Your first duty is to your child. You did the right thing. It seems they only invited your daughter to make fun of her. Agreed. I would also ask some careful questions of your child. If she ran to you, there might have been more going on. Being upset and humiliated is enough for some children to literally run to their parents, but not all. And if they refused to buy her food at McDonald's after inviting her over and laughed about it, what else happened or happens at their houses? Who else doesn't get McDonald's and laughed at for it? Honestly, if you are on that tight of a budget, you can't afford to feed your daughter's friend. Either don't invite her to the sleepover, or you just maybe don't go to McDonald's. I'm glad your daughter texted you and you didn't hesitate. She won't forget how you showed up for her. I'm amused by their surprise when you rolled up to that Mickey D's to rescue your daughter from that situation, essentially. What the heck did they think was going to happen? Those people are mean. I'm glad you were there for your kid. I, 27 female, have 3 children, a male preteen, a young male child, female toddler. My partner and I both work, but since my hours are more flexible, I've picked up most of the childcare, such as dropping the children off at school/childminder, picking them up, taking them to the park, doing homework, etc., as well as 50% of the housework, so meals, ironing, etc. My partner will help after a little nagging, and he'll usually take the children to the park on the weekend. Last week, I didn't feel good come Saturday, and I felt awful dizzy, had headaches, hot flashes, etc., and I was just so tired. So I asked my partner to care for the children that day. My youngest is clingy. She gets upset whenever I leave the room and goes through a phase where the only word she knows is no. So my partner was in and out, asking for me to handle it. My middle child has a habit of asking me to do something or where something is, while not even considering asking their dad. Partner came in and asked if I'd help settle my youngest as she requested me. I refused and may have snapped that he's her dad and to leave me alone. I will admit my final fuse was when my middle child came in crying because apparently my oldest was looking at him funny. So I told him to tell his dad, and when he left, I locked the door. My head was killing me, especially around a crying child. My middle child was upset because he thought he'd upset me. My partner was like, I know you're sick, but just offering cuddles to the children would have been nice, and I needed help. You know the youngest gets upset without you, and apparently you're the only one who calms her down. It's not that he's not around that she's unsettled. It's just natural for children to pick one person, and the doctors have said she'll grow out of it. My partner's upset, although even a week later, I'm still feeling dizzy with hot flashes. He just wants an apology, but I just don't feel like I need to. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Your partner needs to grow up and start being a father. You're entitled to your own time, Mama. I'm glad you're feeling better. This was a one-time thing. You were sick, and if anything, you could tell your partner you didn't want to be near the children to keep them from getting sick. Unbelievable that he couldn't help you out for one day. Hey, I know you feel like hot garbage, but I had to deal with cranky kids, and I think you should apologize for being too sick to help. It's weaponized incompetence. He wanted you to cuddle with them while you're sick. Does he want to care for a sick wife and 3 sick kids? And every time he barges into your room, needing your help, he's proving that to them, that he's not someone that can handle their care and needs on his own, or if he even wants to. He needs to step up and parent his kids. They're getting overly attached to you because you're the main parent in their eyes, when it should be equal. He needs to learn how to settle them and handle their problems and disputes independently. You need to get well and can't if you aren't allowed to rest and heal. Yep, imagine if husband was the one who was sick. I bet he wouldn't get out of bed for anything, much less his kids. He's their father. He's not doing you a favor by watching them. Ask him what he'll do if this medical condition turns out to be serious or requires you to stay in the hospital. Please get yourself checked and hold your ground on this. You shouldn't have to lock your door to get a minute of rest. I, 34 female, live in southern Arizona. I have a new neighbor, an Irish woman, 30s, who recently moved here with her American husband. They moved into the apartment next door about a month ago. Before that, they lived in New England, where the states are much, much smaller. Comparison for anyone who's never thought about it. The state of Massachusetts from north to south is the same as the distance from Tucson to Phoenix. I'm single, and my neighbor's husband is out of town for a couple of weeks for work, so she thought it would be fun to take a day trip to show her around the area. Great. She wanted to start at the Grand Canyon. Not great. Then she thought it would be nice to pop over to Las Vegas for lunch. Oh no. I tried to tell her that she had picked places that were much farther apart than she thought, but she insisted it couldn't be that bad. So I pulled up Google Maps and showed her just how far we were talking about. That if we drove from here to the Grand Canyon, it would be 7 hours if we never stopped for food or gas. Then 4 hours from the Grand Canyon to Las Vegas, and that's not even counting the drive home. It's not an easy, fun day trip. After seeing the times, she now believes me about the distance, but she says it was rude to pull up a map to show her. She said that if she wasn't getting what I was saying, it's my fault for explaining badly, and that using Google to show her was just an idiot move to treat her like she was stupid or a child. I suggested a few places closer to us, but she yelled, "You better look up a map and make sure it's not too far first," and returned to her apartment. I really didn't mean to upset her, and I definitely don't think she's stupid or a child. I just didn't know how else to convince her that the trip she wanted to take wasn't possible. Am I the idiot? LOL, bye Felicia. Not the idiot, OP. How else are you supposed to show someone the distance between points A, B, and C? Interpretive dance? Showing her a map is a perfectly logical and respectful way to demonstrate the distances and times involved. I always do it when I want to find driving distances for myself. Her reaction seems childish. She disagreed with what you told her, so you showed her hard evidence. She should have given you more respect, since you've lived there longer than her and were likely to know better already. And once you backed up your point, she should have conceded. Geez, these are the tourists who end up dead or needing rescuing in Australia. Oh, no. People already living in an area are much dumber and less informed than those who move there and do no research. Most of these backwood yokels can't even read. It's a proven fact. She was likely embarrassed that she made such a basic mistake, and rather than thanking OP for educating her and blaming it on her own past experience with much smaller states and regions, she took out her embarrassment on the OP. The gist is this. I lost my mom to a long-term health issue when I was 10. The cost of treatment drained my parents' finances, and it was just Dad and me after Mom died. No extended family. Dad started dating when I was 12, and he met Jane. After a few months, he told me her son had a form of brain cancer and was very sick, and that they were getting married and he'd be helping to take care of her son. We went from 2 in a tiny 2-bedroom house to 4 in a tiny 2-bedroom house, and me having to share my room with a terminally ill toddler I didn't know. We had to make so many changes. No more takeout, which was a once-a-month treat before that. I had to stop my one and only extracurricular activity. No friends were over because the noise bothered him. No space was just mine. No extra money for celebrating birthdays and Christmas. When I was 15, Dad and I got into a huge argument because I was never home and always said no to helping Jane take care of her son. When I told him how much I hated the situation, he looked me in the eye and told me to grow up. He also told me that I was old enough to understand that life wasn't always easy or fun, and that a rougher life could build character. He told me we grew our family, which was a good thing, and one of the consequences of that sometimes is having less, but it was worth it for the extra love. I told him that was BS. He told me that I was not his whole life, and he wouldn't stop doing what he wanted to do because of me. Then he told me to never say anything negative about his stepson because he was a kid and didn't need to know I resented him for being sick. After that talk, I was even more distant and left when I was 17, right after graduation, and couch surfed until I went to college. I graduated high school at 17 and turned 18 that October. I didn't stay in touch. Then when I was 19, I heard that my dad's stepson had died. In college, I met my wife and we got married this past June. Then in November, my dad showed up and told me he wanted to talk. I shut the door in his face. After that, he kept showing up where I was to talk. After getting annoyed with him, I agreed to meet him for coffee. He told me how he'd ended up divorced from Jane and how his stepson had died, and he looked disappointed when he learned that I knew. He told me he'd been struggling a lot and hoped I could help him out. I laughed in his face and told him he had some nerve. He mentioned how he'd spent a lot of money on finding me and wanted us to repair things, but he also needed my help. I told him no way. He became angry and told me he was my dad and was always there for me and I owed him. I told him I owed him nothing, and I threw most of his words back in his face, including that he needed to grow up and that he was not my whole life and would not stop me from doing what I wanted. It became a scene. He told me that I should have grown more compassionate at my age. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Your dad sacrificed you so that he could get laid. And as things turned out, the family he created wasn't all that real after all. Instead, he was just a patsy to help take care of a sick kid. You owe him nothing. The wife probably left as soon as her son was buried. I will say that it sounds like OP could use some therapy. Not because he denied his dad a relationship, but because that level of anger and resentment and those deep-seated abandonment issues don't just go away on their own. OP has been through a lot, and my heart goes out to him. I'm a mom, and if one of my kids died, I wouldn't want to stay married or be able to even look at someone who just threw their child away when I did everything I could to keep mine alive. Once the haze of it is over, OP's dad probably disgusted her, and she left him. OP, your dad quite literally showed up after he had nothing left but you. That's a huge red flag, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, your dad spent money finding you so he could ask you for money, and the finding only became necessary after he had nothing and no one left. He chose poorly. Stay no contact. This is a man who never prioritized you and just fed you platitudes. You're correct. You owe him nothing. I, 19 male, smoke all day, every day. It's just a normal part of my routine, and I don't see anything wrong with it. And this is not something that I want to be judged on. My mom is completely against me smoking herbs, and she's always telling me to stop. I believe that it's nature's medicine and that society oppresses those who use it. It has helped me in so many ways, and it upsets me that it's still stigmatized. My mom told me a few days ago that my uncle and younger cousins, a preschooler and a young child, would be over around 3 p.m. yesterday and asked me not to smoke that day. She always gets upset if she sees me smoking, so I didn't do it while she was at home. She went to the grocery store in the morning, and I figured it would be okay to blaze up in Mom's living room with the windows open before my cousins showed up. Well, as it turns out, my uncle and 2 cousins showed up early and walked in as I was smoking a joint and lounging on the couch in my underwear. It was a really embarrassing moment, and I'm sure my small cousins were shocked to see me like that. To make matters worse, they saw me coughing in a haze of smoke as they walked in. My uncle was upset, and he screamed at me for smoking in front of the children and being irresponsible. He told me that I needed to grow up and start thinking about the consequences of my actions. I could tell he was really disappointed in me, and the whole situation frustrated me. I know this was not a good situation, and I regret that my cousins had to see me like that. But here's the thing. I don't think I did anything wrong. My mom told me the wrong arrival time, so how was I supposed to know that my cousins would be coming over early? And I don't see the big deal about smoking in my own home, as long as I'm not bothering anyone. This would have been avoided if I had been told the correct time. Regardless of your way of life, your cousins are children and should not be around smoke. Your mom made it clear and asked you not to smoke on that day. You smoked. You got busted. You're the idiot. And you do need to grow up. Not because you smoke, but because you smoke all day, every day, and don't take responsibility for yourself or your actions. Exactly. It's not only that she didn't want the kiddos to see you smoke. No one wants kids to have to breathe in smoke for their health. Also, anything you do all day, every day is a problem. That's the definition of an addict. I don't care if you're doing pot or jogging. Moderation is important. You obviously couldn't even control your habit for one day. That's a really big deal. OP also seemingly lives with his mom and doesn't even have the decency to put on some clothes and smoke outside. Oh, and it's nature's medicine. If you need to take medicine all day, every day, you are severely ill. If you don't need medicine all day, every day, but take it nonetheless all day, every day, you're an addict. Grow up, OP, and stop being so horrible to your mom. She's also affected by the passive smoke all day, every day. She's probably walking around high all day, not realizing it. I want to throttle you, OP, for the absolute disrespect. I, 30 female, have a stepsister called Bella, also 30. Her dad and my mom got together when we were 16. Bella was very upset about her parents' divorce and was very hostile to my mother. So obviously, she and I weren't going to be on the best of terms. And as we got older, we just didn't bond. But I always got along well with her two brothers, Jake and Max, and we're still close. Over the last year, Bella's been reading a lot about psychology and is always bringing up what she thinks everyone else's issues are. She'll send articles about narcissistic parents, golden children, scapegoats, triangulation, etc., to our family group chat with messages like, "Sibling, this is you," or "Isn't this like mom?" their bio mom. Jake, Max, and my stepdad all say it annoys them that all she wants to talk about is the past. She's like this in person too. No matter how often we smile and nod, and sometimes even say that we're not interested in armchair therapy from her, she just says she has a right to express her feelings, and she's trying to start a dialogue. Part of her whole thing is deciding that her dad replaced her with me because she reminds him of her mother, and because he loves my mom and never loved hers. I'm his favorite/golden child. This all came to a head over Christmas when Bella noticed the family photos my parents had on a shelf in their dining room. She asked where the picture of her and her dad at her graduation was, and he said they'd moved it to make room for a picture of him and me and my mom at my wedding, and her graduation photo was now in the lounge. Bella scoffed and sneered, "Of course." Over lunch, I was talking about a photo shoot I was working on, and Bella chimed in about how our parents will probably replace more photos of her with ones from my photo shoot. I told her this makes no sense because the photos aren't even going to be of me, and she just said it didn't matter. She was invisible when I was around, and that I took her place in everyone's life, her dad's, her brother's, even my husband. At this point, I just snapped and said that that was an absurd accusation when she makes every family conversation about herself. While we all appreciate that she's deeply hurt by many things, we're all sick of being psychoanalyzed. I said that her obsession with me was ridiculous because the only person I've ever heard compare us is her. She needs to find someone qualified and appropriate to discuss these hurt feelings with and stop suffocating all of us with her feelings because we're all bored. Jake just started laughing, and Max shouted, Thank God someone said it. But Bella burst into tears and left the table. She went home early and has since removed herself from the group chat and isn't talking to her dad or brothers. While I stand by the points I made, I didn't mean to isolate her from her family. So I'm starting to wonder if I'm the idiot. Not the idiot. Bella needs to stop reading psychology journals and see an actual psychologist, counselor, or psychiatrist so she can work through these issues within herself and with the family. Maybe once she does that, a family session can be had if y'all are willing to try and help her in that way. Homegirl needs to stop analyzing everyone else and analyze herself. Sis needs real therapy. She probably needed it when her parents split. That's on the adults, not you. She was the only girl with 2 brothers, then you came along. So instead of being upset with her parents, as some kids are when divorce happens, she's taking it out on you. Disagree. Everyone's the idiot here. Especially her father is a massive idiot. Her father for removing her graduation photograph from where it was originally and replacing it with one of yours when he knows how sensitive she is about being replaced in his life by you. He has not bothered to address it one-on-one with her or get her to therapy. She has trauma that has not been addressed earlier by continuously dismissing her hurt feelings. You have all aggravated it. Hopefully she'll get better now that she has cut herself from all of you. I'm glad someone mentioned that. Like if you know there are issues with your daughter and stepdaughter getting along, and your daughter's very vocal about you replacing her with her stepsister, I would think you'd think a little more deeply about things, like swapping an actual photo of your daughter with one of your stepdaughter. I, 54 male, have 2 children, 23 female and 21 male, with my wife, 52. When the kids were young, my parents set up education funds for both of them, which was very generous. However, my wife and I always expected our kids to attend college and then graduate school, as we have done. I have a PhD and my wife has a master's. Because of this, we decided not to use the funds for our kids' undergrad degrees and didn't tell them about the money. My daughter has always been more into liberal arts, while my son is more of a STEM guy. My wife and I worried about her ability to find a job, but she insisted on studying music and film in college. She was accepted to some top schools and chose to attend a rather expensive one, but she had scholarships to cover almost all of her tuition. Everything else, plus living expenses, was her responsibility. She lived in a small apartment shared with friends in a not-so-nice area far from campus, but she was fine and learned how to budget effectively. After graduating, she luckily found a job that didn't pay extremely well, but she enjoyed and scrapped the idea of grad school. My son decided to do engineering, and he also expressed that he had no interest in grad school. My wife and I were disappointed but accepted it, since at this point, he's already all set up with a very good job when he completes school. Since he didn't receive as many scholarships as his sister, we decided to use his education fund to cover his tuition and living expenses. He was able to get a large and nice apartment of his own close to the school, which is important since his classes are so demanding and he needs a comfortable space to work. My daughter was confused and asked how he could afford this, and he told her about the education fund. She called us and asked why she didn't have one, and we told her she did. We didn't use it because we hoped she would attend grad school. She seemed hurt by this and asked if there was any way she could have the money now. We explained that there would be a fee to simply withdraw the money for non-education uses, and if we chose to do that, it would belong to her grandparents, so they could put it towards their own use. She's been quiet and short when answering our text, and hasn't answered our calls at all since then. I know that it seems unfair to her, but it's really not her money in the first place, and she's no longer in college. Plus, her brother only received it for educational purposes, and it wouldn't be right for her to just have it to spend now. Am I the idiot? You are the idiot, and I'm surprised between your PhD and master's degrees, you couldn't figure that out. Goes to show no matter how fancy of a degree you have, when you have room temperature IQ, you have room temperature IQ. So let me get this right. Your daughter attended college and had a scholarship. Your son attended college with no scholarship. You chose to not let your daughter use her college fund for everything that her scholarship didn't cover, and you let your son use his for everything. The college fund, you said, wasn't even her money, but it isn't yours either. What exactly do you plan to do with her college money? Probably give it to their son for a down payment on a house or something, because his house needs to be close to his STEM job. But the daughter can live in a dump because she needs to learn to live as a struggling artist/musician. OP, at this point, you need to grovel, unless you want to lose your daughter forever. First, you need to apologize for substituting your judgment on the best way to use the funds for your daughter's judgment. You need to make amends. Then you need to circle back and see what your parents' bequest terms were. And don't even get me started on favoritism. You used the funds for your son to enjoy a cushy life during his undergraduate studies, but didn't do the same for your little girl? Really? Seriously, if there was any doubt, you are the idiot, truly and completely. Update. Am I the idiot for not giving my daughter her education fund money? I understand the consensus is that my wife and I are the idiots. I texted my daughter to ask if she wanted us to withdraw the money for her and what she wanted to do. This was her response. I don't care. Maybe they can transfer it to other grandkid who's a kindergartner if the fee is seriously too much. I don't know about grad school. I haven't thought about it much recently. If I do apply, it wouldn't be for another couple of years, and I hadn't been counting on having any financial help in the first place, so it really doesn't even matter. Thanks for asking, though. My wife and I are discussing our daughter's response and our next actions to resolve this situation. For context, my wife has always had a strange relationship with my daughter and didn't approve of many of her life choices. She believes we should take our daughter's words at face value and assume she no longer wants the money. For some of the responses here, I fear that my daughter's response was out of resentment, and I suggested taking out as much money as her brother was given, so at least they receive the same amount. She could use it responsibly towards rent, groceries, transportation, etc., or in some other way to further her career, so it would still be for her educational purposes. My wife is firm in her opinion, and we'll continue discussing it tomorrow. Many have asked about where my parents stand on this. At this point, they're not mentally aware enough to really participate in the discussion. They did know about our grad school stipulation and thought it was fine. They also knew that we took out some money for our son once we were confident he was not pursuing an advanced degree, and we're okay with that. They said it was our decision as parents what to do with our daughter's fund, and they would support whatever we decided for her. It wouldn't be useful to ask them what to do with it now, but I've always said that whatever is unused will go back into their care. I've tried to call my daughter with no luck, which is why I sent the text. Despite what many have said here, I do hope this doesn't end our relationship.